the Commission is very committed to finding a way to use this money to support Ukraine. And it sounds from the talks today as though maybe there is now a majority view in the European Union that there is a safe legal way of doing this. It would make a massive difference because these are huge sums of money. The United Kingdom has spent about something like £20 billion so far over the last 4 years supporting Ukraine. This would be over €100 billion in sort of one go. So it would be a very significant injection of support, both militarily and financially, for Ukraine.
Number 10 said it was a critical moment in the negotiations to try to end the war. But President Trump has accused European leaders of having unrealistic expectations and said President Zelensky had failed to read the latest his proposals. For his part, the Ukrainian leader has set out his objections to giving up territory to Russia. Keir Starmer said any peace deal must include hard-edged security guarantees for Ukraine.
We stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire. And that's why it's so important that we repeatedly set out the principle that matters about Ukraine are for Ukraine. And we stand here to support you in the conflict and support you in the negotiations and make sure that this is a just and lasting settlement.
Well, I'm joined now by Sir Mark Lyall Grant, former National Security Advisor. Good evening to you, Sir Mark.
Good evening, Carol.
Good to have you with us. Let me just ask you first of all about that warning from the First Sea Lord, the head of the Navy, about the threat from Russian forces in the Atlantic. What do you make of what you heard there?
Well, of course, he's absolutely right, and he would know. I mean, Russia has stepped up its activity. It's testing NATO's and Britain's defences on land, sea and air. And particularly, I think the incapability that Russia has invested in their sort of submarine cable, their underwater capabilities against the vital cables that bring internet services, etc., across the Atlantic to the UK is of great concern. So I think when Jenkins is saying the obvious, that he thinks the money needs to be invested in the naval field as well as in the Air Force and the Army.
The Times is reporting that this deal to unlock £100 billion for Ukraine could take place within days. This is frozen assets held across frozen Russian assets that could be used to support Ukraine. What do you make on that, first of all? How important is it to unlock these funds, do you think?
Well, it's really important because there's about €200 billion worth of Russian assets being held in Belgium by the Euroclear Bank. Now, what's been agreed by the EU over the last 3 years is that the interest on that deposit can be used to support Ukraine. But Belgium and one or two other countries have always resisted using the actual capital, if you like, of that sum, because they are worried that there could be legal ramifications and that Russia could sort of take action legally against Belgium for having used its money, as it were. But the Commission is very committed to finding a way to use this money to support Ukraine. And it sounds from the talks today as though maybe there is now a majority view in the European Union that there is a safe legal way of doing this. It would make a massive difference because these are huge sums of money. The United Kingdom has spent about something like £20 billion so far over the last 4 years supporting Ukraine. This would be over €100 billion in sort of one go. So it would be a very significant injection of support, both militarily and financially, for Ukraine.
But when it comes to the actual negotiations on a deal to end the war, I just wonder how much any of what we heard from Number 10, from other European leaders pledging their support for Ukraine, talking about the need for security guarantees, how much does any of that really matter when essentially President Putin has shown no sign of budging whatsoever towards Ukraine's demands. And President Trump, once again, has been criticising the Europeans, saying that their demands are unrealistic. He's just, on his Truth Social, reposted a New York Post story, which is headlined, "Impotent Europeans can only fume as Trump rightly sidelines them from Ukraine deal."
Well, it's a good question, Carol, and you're absolutely right. The European leaders are in a very difficult position because they want to show 100% support for Zelensky. They don't want to pressure him into any concessions, as the United States has been doing. But at the same time, they want to keep President Trump and the United States on side because they need the United States in order to get Russia to come to the table. And the recent national security strategy issued by the United States shows that there is a very significant gap in the approach to Russia between the United States on the one hand and Europe on the other, because that security strategy talks about building strategic stability with Russia and saying that the Europeans have unrealistic expectations about the outcome of the Ukraine conflict, and that the US will invest diplomatic effort in preventing war between Europe and Russia. So it's quite clear that President Trump doesn't see Russia as a threat in the same way that European leaders do. And that is making the European position on this Ukraine conflict extremely difficult.
And just briefly, if you can, Sir Mark, I mean, how great do you think is the risk that President Trump could still just simply try to cut some kind of a deal with President Putin, which really does not reflect Ukraine's concerns, especially when you've got the Russians holding out tantalizing deals on all kinds of things, including raw minerals?
Well, there is clearly a risk. I mean, President Trump wants a deal, and he wants a deal more or less at any price, provided that there is some economic benefit from it for the United States. But there are some constraints. I mean, he doesn't want to be seen publicly to have sort of given in entirely to Putin's wishes. And Zelensky does have some supporters in Washington, particularly in Congress. So I think there are some constraints on President Trump, but it's really important that the main European leaders, as they did today, show that, yes, they are prepared to step up and spend their own money supporting Zelensky, but they are not prepared to allow Zelensky's views to be overridden and for land to be taken away from Ukraine against his wishes. So I think the arguments about security guarantees once the fighting stops, which of course at some point it will do, and Ukraine having the sovereign right to choose its own future thereafter, are absolutely fundamental for European security. And that's the message that they're trying to get across to President Trump.
Sir Mark Lyall Grant, really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.